Hey there, I'm author and attorney Kelly O'Connell, a practicing lawyer in New Mexico with Knockout Radio. Increasing knowledge one podcast at a time. And today's story is about Patrisse Cullors and her 4 mansions of many colors. This is the beginning of the end for BLM. And the title, Black Lives Matter and So Black Fraud Shatters. Pay attention and recount the horrific fraud of a practicing Marxist, BLM founder Patrisse Cullors, and her fraud. In an astounding development, Patrisse Cullors, one-third founder of Black Lives Matter, has resigned as head of BLM, stating that she had laid the foundations and she had set it up so other people could run it, and it was time to move on. Now, of course, there's more to the story. There always is. But this comes a week after a bombastic UK BLM leader, Sasha Johnson, just a couple of weeks ago was shot in the head by a rival British gang at a house party. Had nothing to do with her being in BLM, although they claimed that it did. And what came out about Patrisse is a whistleblower, some unknown person, revealed that she had purchased 4 luxury houses. One of them, catch this, a structure in exclusive Topanga Canyon in Los Angeles, California, which has a guest house and a jet hangar. This was for her, quote, family, which consists of no kids or other family, but just her wife. Ironically, this trendy enclave boasts celebrity residents with less than 2% black residency. Isn't that interesting? Altogether, her houses are worth almost $4 million. Now, Cullors made a huge mistake. She's in over her head. At first, she claimed she never took a salary from BLM, but worked for the organization for years. I think she started it in 2013, and according to records, the ones she's provided made about $120,000 in 6 years. So, maybe not a lot of money, but $20,000 a year, whatever. But she implies when she says she's never had a salary that since the money had to come from somewhere, these were non-salary funds. Now you can imagine the temptation. They got $90 million last year from donations, and a lot of it is corporate. And yet they refused to open the books and clear up the matter. And so, although they brought in $90 million, you got to ask yourself, where did that money go, right? Local BLM groups across the nation claimed they never received a penny from any of the booty. So, for instance, in one instance, they did a fundraiser for a young kid that was killed, and they fundraised on this poor young man's death. He was shot to death. But the mother claims she never got a penny. So even though it was a GoFundMe or whatever for his funeral, they didn't get handed any money. And the young man, Brown, who was killed in St. Louis, the dad said, we never got a penny from Black Lives Matter, and you used us to fundraise, and so we need $20 million of that 90. So that's not going to happen because Cullors is now out of the group. But it causes me to ask the question, what is a working or practicing Marxist anyway? Now, you can go to the book, Marxism, Plain and Simple English, the Theory of Marxism in a Way Anyone Can Understand. And you can get that on Kindle, but I boiled it down for you pretty simply. Marxism, first of all, is an economic theory that also has strong political elements to it. And it is about just a few things. Number one, it's about society and the classes in society. So you've got the upper class, the wealthy, you've got the middle class, you've got the lower class, you have the totally destitute, completely poor. And in Marxism, what the goal is for everybody to be treated the same way, so that no one is treated any better or any worse for their station in life. And in capitalism, Marxism claims capitalism is broken into two classes, workers and capitalists, or what they call proletariats and the bourgeoisie. Now, interestingly enough, when this was written in the early parts of the 1900s, in the early parts of the 1800s, the 19th century, proletariats were technically factory workers, so you can see how antiquated it is, and then the bourgeoisie is the owner of the factories. And now you've got all kinds of people out there, and there's a lot of owners, there's a lot of middle-class people, and there are a lot of people who do what some of you listening do, get on eBay and open a little business, or you do an Uber service. There is a mixed economy now, and it's not like the old days when there was not much of a middle class, and you were either rich or poor. And that's why Marxism is a poor fit for America. Now, Marx also claimed that the corporations exploited workers and controlled society, and so as a result, the bourgeoisie or the rich, these people get their money from the poor by stealing it. And this is one of the shocking claims out of Marxism, and it really kind of throws some shade on them, because it tells you that Karl Marx was not a sophisticated guy, not like he thought he was. And yes, he came up with a theory that has caused revolutions and a lot of heartache ever since he wrote it down, and he lived between Germany and Paris and London. And this is an aftermath of the French Revolution. Marx claimed that it was scientific, but there's really nothing scientific about it. Everything in Marxism was disproved before he died. But it makes a tremendous impact on people who are naive, and it makes victims. And you've noticed now with the woke movement, excuse me, and the Black Lives Matters and all this critical race theory, that you have a lot of victims out there. And so what they're trying to do is to stir up frustration in these people that see themselves as victims. And so according to traditional classical Marxism, the workers would finally realize how exploited they are and would rise up and throw off their chains and then take over. And that's what they did in Russia. They took over, but it was a disaster. In any point in the history of the USSR you look at, there are just phenomenal numbers of murders. And there's also incredible human rights violations. In addition to that, there was a great deal of poverty. Now, what's the point of overthrowing the legal system and the political class and overturning the economy if the net result is worse than when you started? And that's what you see here right now, is this attempt to use the border to bring in more people to destabilize these states that these people are going into, to get rid of as much fuel as possible. So Biden just shut down the drilling permits up in Alaska, in certain parts of Alaska. He's already shut down the Keystone pipeline, and they're trying to shut down in Michigan. They're trying to shut down the L5 pipeline. And so what Marxism thrives on is chaos. And if you're wondering why things seem so chaotic since as soon as Biden got into office, that's why. Biden sends a lot of money to Iran to show that we're serious about getting back into that ill-fated treaty. And they immediately take the money and buy missiles and send them down to Hamas, who immediately attacks Israel. So Marx needed... in his system, he needed chaos. He needed revolution. So the revolution feeds the ability to take over the system, because if there's a war, if there's a civil war going on, or if there's widespread poverty or unrest, if there are riots, if there, like there was across the United States over George Floyd, and if the political class, like the Democrats, didn't say anything about it, it went on and on and on. And did you know Portland, Oregon is still dealing with these rioters. And I watched a video. This guy goes down and drives around all these places that I used to know because I used to live there. And I got my degree from the University of Oregon, but I went to Portland State, and the upshot was that all these buildings are boarded up, and there's so much trash, and there's so many homeless people. And you might say, well, Kelly, the homeless, it's just a sign of how bad the economy is. And these people, that's not correct. These people have been there for a long time, and it's because the government refuses to enforce quality of life crimes, misdemeanors, because they feel like these people have a right to do whatever they want. If they want to sleep in your front yard, just about, if they want to sleep in the street, or if they want to take over public parks or whatever, like they're doing in Laurelhurst Park in Oregon, in Portland, then you have to let them. So there's all these people that have been living at Laurelhurst Park on the sidewalk, and I can tell you it wasn't like that when I was there. And so the people who live across from the park can no longer sell their houses, and they're constantly being encroached by these homeless people. So what would I do? I would immediately draft a new law or a new rule that says homeless camps have to be gone in 30 days. Give the people a few days to find a new place. And encourage the shelters and, all of these different places that help people. But, there's people that move to Oregon because they got it so good there. And so you don't want to be so lax on homeless people that hobos from across the bums or whatever you want, whatever disparaging remark people make about them. If these homeless people relocate, you don't want them coming to your town. And that's what's happened in Seattle. And my sister told me she took the train from Portland all the way to Seattle, and she said along the entire route, it was almost unbroken. There were tents, and there was rubbish and everything. And she said she was just shocked. And the reason that this happens, since we've until very, very recently had the world's strongest economy and still do, it's not for lack of income. It is for the idea that people are now embraced in terms of being homeless. You want to be homeless, that's your business. And so it is caused by wrong policy and a failure to enforce the policy and the rules and the laws that we have now. And in Portland, if people go and they protest and they riot and they burn and catch things on fire, the DA, who was named Schmidt, Mike Schmidt, just like the third baseman from the old Reds, Cincinnati Reds, this guy will not really prosecute anybody. And so you've got this just cycle of attacks and a failure to prosecute. They arrest, but they let them go. And it's just chaotic, and it's heartbreaking. Portland was on the had reached the number 3 position of the most attractive property in cities across the nation out of 80. And now they're down to 66, and it's still dropping. And if you see mile after mile of businesses with boards on their windows, you don't even know if they're open or not. And these windows are smashed and repeatedly smashed until they just give up and put boards on them. A lot of business owners have given up and have just closed, and they've either gone home to sell stuff online, or they've just closed, they're just retired. And the sad thing is, Portland was probably the most beautiful city I had ever seen. It's on the water. It's got a couple of nice rivers in the area. It's got hills in the city. It's got incredible forests, a lot of greenery because it's lush there. And then you've got the nearby Three Sisters, Mount Shasta, and Mount Hood, etc. And then the coast is only maybe 100 miles away, probably not even really that far for a drive, and I used to live on the Oregon coast, and it is just shocking. But I want to get back to this idea about Cullors. Cullors is probably, I assume that if they prosecute her, they can get her because the money was not meant to be given to her. Now, if she's running a nonprofit, then she certainly had certain standards and rules she had to follow. And if she ended up taking $4 million, which what it seems like anyway. Now she says, I've got book deals, I've got TV shows to run, that's why I'm dropping out. So could she have gotten $3 million, $4 million from book deals? You know, that would be hard for me to believe. I guess it's possible, but why didn't she say that? No, these houses that you think I stole from BLM, they were given to me. The money was given to me for books. So back off. She never said that. And, you know, it's just, I just want to say it is so typical. Human nature is such that we tend to take advantage of opportunities. And that's why we have laws, we have jails, we have prisons, we have courts, we have judges and prosecutors and defense attorneys. But my analysis is that Patrisse Cullors really did act like an actual Marxist because in real Marxist societies, the only folks living comfortably are the political class. So the people who have DACAs, they have enough money, they have enough food, are politicians. Why? Because they run everything, obviously. Now, remember this, if you ever think about supporting socialism or Marxism, when money is confiscated, it is never thrown into a pool and simply redistributed to the poor. It goes to the government, and then the government decide who gets what. So in a Marxist country, you have a command economy. Now, you have people running businesses where the owners have been thrown out, the people who actually built the business and worked there. And so political flunkies are sent into businesses to run them, and they don't know what they're doing because they have no experience in it. And you have somebody in the government, it could be a group of people, it might be just one person deciding how many boots they're going to make for a particular year, how many, and Oregon's very wet, how many galoshes, how many coats, how many umbrellas. There's no way to guess the proper amount. And so there's always shortages in Marxist countries. And so the only way that you can meet people's needs is you have a bunch of people in the marketplace. And this is really an argument over whether people have freedom to act as independent decision makers in the economy. It's that simple. And bureaucracy or doing things through a small group of individuals is a total disaster in this sense. So you've got people in the private sector constantly coming up with new ideas, trying to reinvent the wheel and stuff. And you might say, well, that's wasteful. Well, I think communism is more wasteful from my observation. There's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of death too. But they waste people's lives, they waste their ambitions, and people are treated like garbage because then the government has the burden of providing for everybody, right? Also, in communism, there's no private property. So how would you know without having any prices on stuff if everything is given away or sold at a nominal price? I mean, what do you think would happen? Excuse me, if you had a chicken farm and the government said you had to sell eggs for 1 cent a piece, and you're thinking, well, each egg cost me a nickel to manufacture. What are you going to do? You're going to, as soon as you can, get out of chicken eggs and go into poultry, farming. And then the government's going to tell you what you can sell poultry for. And all the time in these Marxist situations, you've got people who are decrying the wealthy for being greedy. Now, is that the purpose of government? No. The purpose of government is to set up structures and then get out of the way. Right now, we've got the government overrunning the private sector with $7 trillion worth of spending, and that's why there's so much inflation. So, these leaders were also moronic and evil because they killed so many. They probably killed 200 million people last century. So I'm just going to mention a few things. Lenin's communism failure. Lenin was the guy that took Marxism and applied it to an actual situation. He failed, and he had to get rid of communism, and he was upset about that. And then he died. His brain ossified. It turned to stone. Can you believe it? He was only, I think, in his 40s. Stalin killed 74 million and was just brutal. And had, the Marxist will tell you it's not fair the way things are run. We need better leadership. Their idea of leadership is a one-person country. It's like having a king. But he killed 74 million people. Now, Mao's great leap forward. And by the way, Lenin killed a bunch of kulaks, a bunch of the farmers. And he told them, I want all of your grain. I want everything that you raise. And the people are like, why would I give everything away and then I'm going to starve to death? So they would keep a little food. Now, Lenin sent his soldiers in to look into their poop and see if there was any grain in it. And if there was, they were murdered. But he destroyed the kulaks because they didn't need him, because they were independent and often subsistence farmers who didn't care about the government. But he ended up killing 5 million of them. Now, Mao's great leap forward. He comes in, he gathers all of the farmers, and he says, we're going to put you on communes. And well, what does that look like? How do we run everything? And he doesn't really know. He admits later he didn't know how to run anything. He just knew that Marx said we have to put the farmers on communes. So this is a disaster, and by the time they give it up, there have been so many famines, 40 million people are dead. And then Mao's pissed that it doesn't work and that everybody's blaming him for this. He puts in the Cultural Revolution and attacks all the authority, like what is going on today. And that was probably another 10 million. He killed at least 78 million is what I understand. And this is all at the University of Hawaii site, and R.J. Rummel, who is recently deceased. So the lesson is there's no such thing as good Marxists in practice, since the movement is based on greed, theft, slander, and a complete lack of faith in people. And it is also based upon false information of how the world works. So Patrisse Cullors, is she going to go to jail? Well, probably not, because everybody in the government, everybody in corporations now love BLM. But she probably should. In any event, this tells me that BLM is a hoax. It's just money making for the leaders, and it's going to implode. There's a lot of people who are totally dissatisfied and giving up on it. So thanks for tuning in. Kelly O'Connell. We'll meet again. I'll do a podcast for you tomorrow. Have a delightful night, and sign up for my podcasts. Become a member. Subscribe, as they say. Have a nice night. Ciao.